Hello friends, how are you doing this fine day? I've just finished my run, and now I am enjoying my life here with the Master Farmer. I'm getting some big EXP. Let's move the microphone a little bit away from the mouse. That's probably fairly annoying, but it cannot be helped. My dodgy necklaces, by the way, they just don't proc. They don't exist. Like, in reality, why would they? Oh, never mind. You just have to complain. But yeah, I'm just leveling thieving, slowly working towards 91, at least. 91, and then 94 will be the next big breakpoint, and after that, we'll see. But today, I thought I would talk about something fun. Thought I would discuss how to enjoy things again, because, frankly speaking, there's been a lot of doomy content on this channel for a little bit, and I thought I would talk about something nice, something I like. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm a tremendous fan of Motoko Shinkai's works. I like all of Comic Wave's stuff. Everything he's done, absolutely phenomenal. Like, beautiful content as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely top tier in every single way. Cannot get enough of it as of late. Well, not as of late, as of ever. Like, I still haven't watched Suzumi, but I've watched everything else he's done, and tremendous fan. And if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend you check them out. So, in essence, I'd like to talk about how to enjoy media today, or how I would personally go about enjoying a piece of media. Because it's kind of important to bask in the glory of certain things, especially something you know is going to be good. You see, when I was a child growing up, my favorite film for the longest time was actually Fantasia, which is, by definition, a celebration of Western culture, right? It's the apex of, untold years of development. You've got, this whimsical Disney fairyland background amidst the blare of classical music. It's a coming together of basically the previous World War II world and the post-World War II world. It's a combination of antiquity with what at the time was modernity, right? It was an apex or a mix of, Judeo-Christian society in a way that really hasn't been done since, and I think as properly. Now, as a child, I couldn't possibly understand that. I just thought it was cool as all heck. And, I really liked the musical score. I really liked, these grandiose themes and, the hero's quest that the main character of it undertakes in Fantasia. And so when I was a child, I enjoyed it for those reasons, even though I couldn't have described it really, And by child, I mean until I was 16. Kind of embarrassing, but, it is what it are. That is just how life is. But I enjoyed it quite a bit for an extended period of time. And what made Fantasia so great is what makes Motoko Shinkai's works so great. So, spoilers if you haven't watched any of his works. They're about distance and human connection and, how that gets degraded over time. And, for instance, if you look at Kimi no Na wa, or Your Name, there's this whole thread, basically the novel is about, or not the novel, but the movie is about the threads of destiny and how people, interact through time and space in essence, and how there's some grand overarching narrative. And for those of you who aren't aware, the Japanese main ethos, the Japanese version of the hero's quest, is the coming of age story of a little girl. That's what all Japanese media en route is, just like how all Western media is, the hero's quest. So that would be your archetypical origination story there for Japanese media. And, in much the same way that, Fantasia represents in the West the pinnacle of, at least a modern-day pinnacle of, the Judeo-Christian hero's quest values, in the West, Motoko Shinkai's works represent, at least to that effect, I think. So, for instance, in Your Name, a lot of people misunderstand this as being, some sort of, SJW gender swap propaganda, which you could argue that, but I disagree. I think it's just, and they don't understand the culture that's associated with it and what it implies, and, going from purity to corruption, as well as the strain of destiny, the main character's goal is to meet her back. It's all exceptionally well done. If you haven't watched it, you should. My favorite Makoto Shinkai flick, though, also happens to do with a lot of my personal values. For instance, I haven't talked about it yet on the channel, I probably will, is that I'm pretty big into environmentalism. Not in not in climate change sort of way, because let's face it, 99% of climate change is very likely just the Earth warming the sun. Anyone who's being honest and looking at anything related to it will come to that conclusion. You have a bunch of dishonest grifters, just like anything else, and science is now more dishonest grifters than anything else. But that's neither here nor there. But my own idea of environmentalism is very different from like that scholarly one. We'll say that much. For me, environmentalism is living in tandem with nature, and representing the values of nature in your actions. So what do I mean? Well, I might as well talk about that before I continue, right? I just can't leave that up in the air. Environmentalism for me is imbibing values from nature and applying them to yourself. So one of those values is in the animal kingdom. For instance, you take exactly what you need. In modern day society, greed is pretty much common. It's the most important aspect, and I'm a minimalist, so for me at least, from an environmentalist standpoint, I take exactly what I need. I have a stockpile of goods for bad times in the winter, but I plan to go through all of them, and I will eat. I don't waste. I will eat all of my stockpile. I will not waste a single drop of anything if I can avoid it. That's just not being Jewish or a minimalist, but it also ties in closely with living in tandem with nature. And so that's like sort of this tribal idea brought into the modern world. It's kind of forgotten, like people throw away stuff or buy things they don't need all the time. And you as a person need to get rid of that sort of idealism and move on to, living more like a natural man would, where you take what you need when you need it. As far as housing goes, you shouldn't take up more space than you need as far as a lot of these things go. And, the excesses of that are, like, for instance, when you're looking at the climate director, John Kerry, and him jet-setting everywhere, which has a carbon footprint that's 300,000 times larger than the average person or something ridiculous like that. Like, actually insane. But, so all of that ties in, though, with taking exactly what you need out of media to enjoy it. So when you're watching something or preparing to watch something, you have to be in that right mindset. You have to be thinking in a proper sense and analyzing the media in a way in which you enjoy it, right? So what do I mean by that when I say analyzing media in which way you enjoy it? You can be cynical or critical of anything, right? And a lot of people will say, it's great if you just turn your brain off, you don't think about things that way. And they are absolutely correct. Now they're explaining an environmental or a minimalist argument to enjoyment without actually going through and initiating it. When you want to enjoy a piece of media, you should take what you want out of it. And, in a Motoko Shinkai film, the narratives are pretty childish. The metaphors are, pretty down to earth. There's nothing great and grandiose here. But what I want out of my media when I'm looking for something is that awe-inspiring, across the ages art, sort of beauty that you're not really going to get in any sort of Western entertainment these days, for instance. It's something that's been lost in the West. So when I'm looking for something, I want to watch something that's actually beautiful, that has an impact. And I don't mean beautiful just as in something that's, pretty to look at, which every Motoko Shinkai film obviously is. They're all basically, they describe 5 centimeters per second as 5 wallpapers per second, right? Absolutely true. And it's all just grandiose and wonderful in that sense. But the overarching narrative and the characters and everything comes together to form just an absolutely beautiful experience. And I'm interested in getting involved in that experience and bringing it out and experiencing it. And that's personally why I really would recommend, or how I would enjoy things. So, for instance, if you're someone that can enjoy that, if you're someone that's enjoyed visual novels, I might play visual novels on stream going forward, or I might review them, because I've pretty much played all of them. I'm a big fan of visual novels too, for this exact reason. Same thing why I like ASMR. When I'm trying to take something from a piece of media, I want to be so involved in it that I can experience it. Like when I play a video game, I want to physically feel my hands going into the farmer's pocket or whatever, right? And I think a lot of people natively get this experience with video games where they're like, you've got your music blaring or whatever, and your adrenaline's pumping, and you're all the way in there, like full throttle, full-throated. I like that experience, especially in video games, but I definitely like it in the media I consume as well. So like a Motoko Shinkai film. I want to be involved in the characters. I want to, feel their struggles in a sense. And so the way I get that is by taking and experiencing what the author is trying to tell and letting it reach you. And not a lot of things can reach you, and not a lot of media these days is even designed to reach you. Like Hollywood films these days are designed with no real overarching narrative, nothing really. It's just, you're supposed to be involved in it not through your own ability or your own thought process, your own intellect. You're supposed to be, involved in something from Hollywood or media through your lizard brain, through, random acts of like high octane intercourse or violence or something like that. And, like big explosions. So everything is dumbed down to this very low level and very almost primeval, something you could imagine like a reptile would like lowest common denominator entertainment, right? I mean, millions of people have made that critique, I'm sure, before. And that's all that's really left as far as Western media goes. There's no more grand arcing narratives like Fantasia, like early Disney, like even Disney has fallen to this sort of propaganda, outlet, and they're suffering for it, as they should. There's nothing wrong with that. And I mean, if that's where they want to take their work and they want to embrace, so be it. There's still good media out there, And I mean, if you want recommendations, I can make an entire video about like media I would recommend, especially like Asian media, but I would immediately suggest, if you haven't seen them all, Kimi no Na wa, like Your Name, absolutely beautiful movie in every sense of the word, like 10 out of 10, like probably, in my opinion, the greatest animated movie ever made, and not close. But, and I still like Tenki no Ko more. Let's be clear here, or Child of Weather. Weathering with You is the English title, I believe. That is, just because of my environmentalist, that just ticks off a box in me. And this is where all this was going, actually, was how much I like Tenki no Ko. And so, while as a film, I will agree with most people that it's not as good as Your Name, like just on a pure artistic or, metaphorical level. And everything else, but me personally, I actually enjoyed it more, and even like the recipe in there, like, seaweed chips or, potato, egg fried rice, that meal that gets made there, I still make that to this day because it's delicious, and, yeah, I don't have bean sprouts to make it right now or else I would, and I'd display it, but, the themes in that movie, I think, really, really tie into the real world much more than I think the creator even intended, at least here in the West, taking it from like a Western perspective. Just, what's a good way of putting this? Like, how I don't want to spoil it. I mean, you just have to watch it, I guess. I will say, watch it and then apply, think about climate change and the loss of it to academy and grifting, and then apply it to the movie when you watch it, and you'll understand what I mean. I can't really say it without ruining the movie or, my opinions on it, and it comes at the end. You'll understand if you're thinking once you make it that far. Have I gotten any good seeds? Oh yeah, 4 Renars. See? Hogging out. But yeah. So, I would immediately recommend watching those films and then, understanding, Grave of the Fireflies, for instance, from Ghibli, and all of this. And, for instance, Grave of the Fireflies is a tragedy in Nihongo culture because of, the fact that the coming-of-age story of a little girl is their atypical story or their archetypal story. It's what all of their media is based about, and the tragedies that happen to the 2 young kids in that film are why it's so impactful. And from a Western stance, we really can't get, without understanding the basis of Japanese culture, we really can't get into it, just like how they can't get into the hero's quest without understanding, Western culture or Judeo-Christian culture. Thankfully, our culture is so permanent all over the world that, most people innately get the hero's journey and how that applies to their media. But we, for instance, don't get, and I think that's why a lot of people don't understand, Asian media to the extent they should, because this whole idea of this coming-of-age story of a little girl just seems awkward to them, and they don't really understand how to appeals to Japanese culture. And there's been a bunch of papers. It's like a multi-hour long discussion to actually explain it further than that. So you might want to do some research on your own if you really want to go in depth into it. But yeah, but all of that being said, it still doesn't really prevent you from enjoying like Makoto Shinkai's works. So highly recommend it. And at some point in your life, you should probably, if you haven't seen it, watch Fantasia or go back and watch, it, because it is a celebration of what Western culture used to be. When they post those image macros, this is what they took from you. They should really have Fantasia there, because that, I think, represents the old world, or the 1990s lost sort of world, more so than anything else, and trying to go and get to a point where you can understand that loss, if you haven't already or haven't comprehended it, is also important for going forward and understanding why, like, I can't even watch Western media these days, like, any of it. Like, the last thing I tried to watch was, like, Tiger King, and that was so degenerate to me still. Like, it was interesting, but it was just so degenerate that I couldn't really connect with it, in a sense. There's, and who knows, like, how that all developed. I think, like, the main protagonist is still in jail. I haven't followed the story after, the alleged events, but, like, getting from, the classics in the West and how they've developed and gone through that into, where we are today, it's just horrible. And when I actually start streaming, I might do some classical literature reviews. That's definitely something. I might make YouTube videos about them too, but that's definitely something on my mind going forward, is like just talking about a lot of these topics, because they're innately very interesting to me. And maybe I'll categorize the differences between cultures and go into detail on all of this. But that's out of scope of all of this. The real point is, how do you enjoy media? You have to understand what you want from it, and then start taking what you want from it and letting it give you the proper, giving you the proper message that it's trying to tell you in a way you can evaluate it. And then after you've done that, you can then decide if it's proper or not. And then you have to understand that for a lot of media, it's not really trying to give you any deeper meaning or message in any current day, and that it's pretty much impossible to enjoy unless you literally, are only interested in some sort of lowest common denominator, visceral sort of viewing experience, in which case you could watch anything and it really wouldn't matter. Like, there's all sorts of, like, over-the-top horrible things on the internet you could watch that all do a better job than they can even show in a movie theater. So for someone like that, like, I don't even know why you would watch a Hollywood movie either, but, it might just be ease of access to that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's plenty of macabre stuff out there too, and maybe I'll go into it. I definitely want to do some manifesto readings too. I have a bunch of ideas about that, and like deep analysis of manifestos. But for now, I think that's a pretty good basis for how you should enjoy something. Also, incense and tea really help. At least to me. I don't know. That could just be personal, but a lot of enjoying media is personal. You have to figure out yourself on a deep level what you enjoy, and then how to get what you enjoy from what you're trying to partake in. And that would be my advice. You have a great day.